Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Soccer Showdown. Joe Archino here with Martino Puccio. Martino, we're going to start with today, of course, the UEFA Champions League, the biggest competition in all of the land. And, of course, Manchester City Football Club headlining this current stage of the competition. Their season really seems to have gotten unraveled when they lost to Barcelona. But then, surprise, surprise, they bounced back with a victory against Barcelona. What kind of symbolic statement do you think that this win made for Manchester City?
I think this is actually one of their biggest wins in the club's history, if you really think about it, because they didn't do much in the Champions League these past few years ever since they won the league. They were just getting out in the first round right after the group stage. But to come home and win after Messi put them ahead at, I think, the 21st minute is when they went up 1-0. And then they put back 3 goals, 2 by Gundogan, to get them 3 points there. And then they got the win at home on the weekend, too. So the whole morale of the club is getting higher now. After that win. And I think it's what I said last week. They just needed to be patient, the Man City fans, because, look, there's no shame in losing to Barcelona 3-0 wherever you play them, home or away. But to have a win at home, 3-1 against them, I think it's fantastic, and it could really propel them to maybe even a group win.
Certainly, Manchester City's morale is high, but now we go to Juventus, whose morale might not be as high, coming off a 1-1 draw the other day to Lyon. And let me ask you, Martino, Juventus, the expectations are always high, but now in this current stage of the competition, we know what the expectations are always to win Serie A. They have the league on lock. But in this competition, there is a lot of demand for them to do better in this. They spent a lot of money. They brought in a lot more players. So let me ask you, how would you assess them to this point in the Champions League?
I don't think their mentality has changed. And you could even go with the quote from Claudio Marchisio, who just came back for them. It was important not to lose. Are you kidding me? Important not to lose. What are you talking about? You're one of the biggest clubs in the world. You spend $90 million on a striker, and you tie 1-1 to Lyon. What kind of loser mentality are you going to have coming into the Champions League? The league's on lock, like you said, so all you really have to do is go out and try and focus on winning the Champions League. You got to the final 2 years ago against Barcelona and got completely embarrassed. They haven't won since the 90s. They've had I think they have the most losses in finals in the UEFA Champions League history. So with this mentality that just like it was important not to lose, I think that's a terrible approach to the way that they want to, if they want to win the Champions League, to say it's important not to lose is the complete wrong mentality to go about it.
Well, another club that's used to doing a lot of winning and not losing is Real Madrid, but they end up on the side of a 3-3 draw just the other day to Liga Warsaw. So, Martino, let me ask you, again, Real Madrid, the expectations, sky high, defending champions of this competition. This is a result that I think has a lot of us puzzled a little bit. What did you think of it?
I think it was a little strange because they were on the road, but at the same time they were up 2-0, and everyone says 2-0 is the most dangerous lead in soccer. But if you really think about it, they weren't putting away their chances that they had. If you watched in the second half, they had multiple chances where they just could not finish. And I mean, even Liga Warsaw, you got to give them credit too, because they just kept coming at Madrid and they were not scared. And that's the right mentality that a team should have in the Champions League if you're going up against Real Madrid, at home or away. So I think it was good for Liga Warsaw to get a 3-3 draw. But I mean, Madrid did come back after they went down 3-2, so that was a good sign that they didn't just quit and fold away. But I think if they just finished a couple more chances, it could have been a blowout. I don't think it's too much to worry about, but I think they'll be in decent shape. I think Ronaldo's not at 100% yet. He's one of those guys that won't admit to being that hurt, because he even saw it in the Euro final. He wouldn't come off the field. He tried to run on a sprained ACL that he had. So I think he's really just got to get back to 100%, and then I think they'll be well on their way to a possible final.
Well, now let's turn our attention to the English Premier League and going back to another Manchester club, Manchester United. We talked last week a lot about the troubles that they've had. Well, those troubles have only compounded even more. A loss just today in the Europa League. Martino, they draw last weekend against Burnley. Jose Mourinho suspended a match. I mean, we've already talked about the troubles that they have, but I mean, how much more can we say?
I think it's also similar to Manchester City in the way that they still have to be patient, although it's still going to be hard to be patient considering there are so many parallels between Manchester and New York. even when the Yankees aren't as talented and they still have high expectations, Manchester United shouldn't have that high of expectations, even though they spend all that money. You spend all that money, you're still going to have to be patient. I mean, Pogba today, he just got hurt. He came out of the game. Who knows how long he'll be. Ibra came in on a free transfer, and he's really not scoring much for them. I mean, drawing to Burnley is 0-0. I think they need to be more patient, but I think there is some cause to concern if you're not picking up points against a team like Burnley, no matter how much money you spend, because you're still Man United.
Well, now we'll turn our attention once again to the other Manchester club in Manchester City. Now, we've talked about it. They have a perfect 6-for-6 to start their season, and then we witnessed the worst managerial run of Pep Guardiola's career. Now it seems like City's starting to get their foot back on track. They win 4-0 against West Brom this past weekend. So let me ask you, Martino, they get that win against West Brom. Midweek, they beat Barcelona. They have another favorable matchup this weekend. Is Manchester City back on track?
I think they are, and I talked about it last week. What they needed to do was to go out and kill a team, just score a lot of goals and even keep a clean sheet. And that's what they did. They won 4-0. It doesn't matter who they played, West Brom, it's always a good morale booster whenever you win 4-0, no matter the team. So, and the fact that they beat Barcelona 3-1 at home, they're on an all-time high probably ever since the first time they won the league in almost 40 years, back a few years ago. So I think this is a similar case to Juventus and Serie A, where they're just going to go on a run, and I think they're really going to separate themselves. I think the only team that's really going to give them a run for anything this season might be Chelsea if they can keep up the play. But at this point, I think they might be in a league of their own if they pick up another win this weekend.
Well, now let's turn our attention to the weekend, and the undoubted match of the weekend is the North London derby. We have Arsenal, we have Tottenham Hotspur. It is always a fun time watching them play. So Arsenal in second place, Tottenham just behind them in fifth place. Martino, who do you have coming out on top for this weekend?
I have Arsenal coming out on top, and I like going off of morale midweek, depending on who you play. So, like Man City beat Barcelona 3-1, so I really like the way they're feeling going into the weekend. And Arsenal had a nice game in the Champions League, but for Spurs, that was just a bad loss at Wembley, 1-0 to Bayern Leverkusen. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter home or away, just a 1-0 loss. They didn't look inspired when they played at all. And going into a derby game where Arsenal always plays the role of the big brother in this matchup, and they have been for the past 10 to 15 years, I think it's going to continue to be that way, and I have them winning 2-1, 2-0.
Well, now we're going over to Italy. Everybody likes Italy. Juventus is what we're going back to now, obviously. Now, Martino, we've seen the last few seasons. Juventus, it has come to a point, and then it has been clearly established that they will once again be Serie A champions. They coming off a weekend where they defeat Napoli. Let me ask you now, is this the point where they start to run away with the league from now?
I think so. I mean, the only other team, I don't know if they were yet to play Roma yet. I don't think they played them in this half of the season. So I don't think there really isn't another team that they're going to have to play that's that much of a threat to them anyways, because they played Milan already. They already lost 1-0, and they took care of Napoli 2-1. So it's just smooth sailing from here on out until the second half of the season, depending on what teams do for reinforcements in January. But I don't really see much competition for them. They picked up the wins after a bad loss, and they're just doing what they need to do, and I think their sole focus should be on Champions League.
Well, we turn our attention to a prestigious club in Italy, but the prestige has not followed them into this season. Inter Milan, to say this season would be a disaster would be an understatement, and they just sacked their manager, Frank de Boer. So, Martino, I'll ask you, AC Milan has seen a little bit of a resurgence this season. What does Inter Milan have to do to get back to that same level of resurgence?
Well, I think the problem is they've gone through so many managers ever since they won the treble with Mourinho. I think it's been about 8 managers now. They brought back Mancini, and that was just a disaster, and it ended up him leaving in early August. So Frank de Boer comes in, and what is he supposed to do at this point in the season? They're spending all this money. There's a cultural identity that's missing from them. So they're really struggling now. I think they're 11th in the standings. I don't think there's a good chance that they'll come back and even make Europa League this year. I think the only chance they have of actually playing Europe next year is winning the Europa League. So I think it's a mess. Their captain Icardi is threatening to kill the ultras, saying that he'll have him killed in his book that he wrote. It's just a complete mess from top to bottom, and I don't think any improvements are going to be made. There's rumors that they're going to try and go after Diego Simeone in the summer, where he used to play at Inter. But if you're him looking out on the outside, why would you even bother touching this club at this point? So So, I mean, it's a big question mark from them here on out, but it's a disaster at this point.
Well, you mentioned Diego Simeone, one of the crown jewels of La Liga, so we turn our attention to that very league. And Barcelona, Real Madrid, we always understand that the league is always determined by the two of them. But right now, it's a competitive battle. Only 2 points separate them at this point. Let me ask you, Martino, last week you advocated for Barcelona. You thought they would be able to narrow that gap and they would eventually emerge as champions. But right now, what are you seeing between the contrasts in both clubs?
Well, I think they're both in a strange place right now, especially going off of Champions League again. I know it still carries over into the weekend. And I know Barcelona has had some injury problems when Iniesta out. I mean, even Ronaldo's not 100%. But if you remember this time last year, Rafa Benitez was coaching Real Madrid, and they looked like a complete wreck, and they didn't look like they were going to win anything. And then they went on to go win the Champions League. So I don't think it's time to panic for Barcelona. They're only down 2 points. That could be a huge swing any moment at any point in the season. I think they're way too talented to even fall too far out of the race. I think they'll be fine. It's just got to take it one game at a time at this point.
Well, one of the main stars of Real Madrid, he's got a little bit more job security now. Real Madrid, they ink one of their stars, Gareth Bale. He signs an extension to 2022. So, Martino, let me ask you, who is Gareth Bale? We've really seen him go from struggling mightily at this club to really expanding his game to a new level. In the world order of top players, where do you have him ranked?
I mean, I wasn't always the biggest Gareth Bale fan just because I thought he relied too much on his speed and he was a little bit one-footed. But after a couple seasons at Madrid, and he was struggling at the start when he first got there, and there was a little miscommunication between him and Ronaldo, I think it's clear-cut that once Ronaldo leaves, this is his team, and I think that he is a top 10 player in the world. I would have to think out through the list. But I think he really is rising, and he's just hitting his peak right now in his career. And I think he's only going to get better. I don't think we've seen the best of him yet.
Well, we certainly have a lot of action to look forward to this weekend. The undoubted match we have to look forward to, Sevilla and Barcelona. Only 1 point separates the two of them. Martino, who you got here?
I have Barcelona here, and I know it's at Sevilla, but I think they're going to get really angry about the loss midweek to Manchester City because they have that mentality that they're just better than everyone else. And it's not a bad thing. I think it's good. They know how talented they are, and they knew they shouldn't have lost a game like that after going ahead early. So I think they're going to carry that over again, yes, Champions League carryover into the weekend. And I think they're going to beat Sevilla 2-1 at their place by goals by Suarez and Rakitic.
Well, as always, everyone, you heard it here first. Joe Archino here with Martino Puccio with Soccer Showdown. We'll catch everybody in the next episode.